obviously being engaged. And it's not listening to those things that you need. You just think of it as like putting on your socks, or brushing your hair or brushing your teeth. You don't think about it anymore. You buy Colgate, you buy something, and it works, and you assume that it's just there and it'll do it for you. But what you don't really understand is, how does it work? Why do we need it? And we're maturing. The industry is maturing. So we heard terms like escrow. We hear terms like KYC, ID, suitability, and obviously the broker dealers are taking care of that. And why is that important there? And how does that affect escrow? And why is escrow so important? And more importantly, with the payment providers like ACH, EFT, credit card, wire, crypto, and then IRA, the $9+ trillion sector, the holy grail, as everybody calls it. But yet in 10 years that I keep hearing about it, Bill and I have had lots of good chats about this, it's still not there. And I really, I'm bringing this conversation piece as it's ending on the other side. It's coming to you guys. And that, Elliot asked a very important question. If all the pieces are there, what's the missing ingredient? And I said, I firmly believe that nobody's listening. They're not listening. Some of the participants in the ecosystem don't listen to each other's requirements to make sure that, as an IRA, I met my requirements as an escrow. And this panel that's going to be led by my co-founder, Jason Futko. And of course, he's got two great panelists with him. Bill Humphrey, the president and CEO and one of the co-founders of New Direction Trust and the IRA custodian. And of course, Mr. Robert Weiss from Wilmington Trust, to discuss these very points that we started. And they're important for all of the companies and CEOs ready to do this. You got to listen, because, and I keep telling everybody, it is no longer a right, it is a privilege. So you have to understand what that privilege requires. Jason, the floor is yours. Have some fun.
Thank you, Oscar.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, some of your guests asked me that you needed to do a lap dance. So that's all I was told to tell you.
I think we're wrong forum. I think it's great that Oscar jumped in and took half the presentation over, but I know it's compliance. It's everybody's favorite topic. At least I assume that's why it keeps everybody up at night. I'm going to probably shoot right in, because he's already kind of given you guys a bit of an intro. I'll start with myself. I'm the co-founder, CFO of KoreConX. Been in the financial services sector for 20 plus years, working from corporate finance to banking and the like. So I've had a pretty broad exposure to everything from compliance to the private markets and the way they operate. So, which is why we've sort of gathered here to sort of share this knowledge and bring these experts together to help share this information with all those people that want to have access to it. So I'm not going to, belabor it too much. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to start with a question to both of you. And as I jump in with a question, maybe give a little bit more detail of your background. So Rob, I guess, Oscar framed it a little bit. What is escrow and what role does it play in the Reg A plus process? And then when we jump over to Bill, what is IRA and why would somebody want to use their IRA to invest in Reg A plus?
Sure, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be joining everyone today. And thank you to all of you who have stayed with the program all afternoon. I know it's been great. I'm Rob Weiss. I'm Managing Director at Wilmington Trust in the Global Capital Markets Group, and my responsibilities are for our escrow, trust, and paying agent services. And we've had the pleasure of working with a number of folks who have been in the conference this afternoon, Rialto and Toro. We have been doing subscription escrow work in the context of capital raises for many years now. I work very closely with a colleague of mine, Boris Traeger, and together this is a very important space for us at Wilmington Trust. So what is an escrow? It's not a bank account. And I think a lot of people just assume it's a bank account. No one goes to sleep thinking about escrows. It's when they're needed that people focus on them. So what is an escrow? An escrow really is a controlled account that we open on the trust platform of our bank. which provides some exceptional credit guarantees or credit comfort for our clients because the assets are generally segregated from other assets of the bank. And the funds in the escrow account can only be used for a very specific business purpose. And they can only be dispersed by us as escrow agent when we are directed to do so. So it's not a checking account, it's not a savings account, it's a very specific controlled account that has exceptional credit protection. Funds are liquid, they're readily accessible when we receive that direction. And it's an important aspect of many arrangements that we've seen in both the Reg D, Reg A space, as well as M&A in general. So a very important non-sexy component of what has to happen.
Go ahead, Bill. I think you're muted. There we go.
Oh, I'm unmuted now. Got the button. So as Oscar was saying, we are a custodian for IRAs and other tax sheltered accounts like health savings accounts and some 401ks. But the IRA it represents a lot of money that people have set aside. And importantly, they've set it aside for the future, which makes it an ideal investor or investment money for something that has a long-term horizon, such as a Reg A offering that, and maybe you want to invest in a variety of them, gives you a great opportunity. But I think that the challenge that we have found in our 17 plus years is that people have been brainwashed, intentionally or not, that an IRA cannot invest in anything that's not on the list already. And that list historically has included just securities that are blessed by the SEC. So our challenge, number one challenge is education. Like Oscar said, we want to teach people that this is their money and they can invest in whatever they decide is going to be a good investment for them, including all of the stuff that we've heard about today. The IRA is just another investor. He's just never known that those funds could go into this investment that he's heard about. So we're trying to move the investment idea from personal money to all the money that an investor controls. And usually there's a lot more of it on the retirement tax sheltered side than there is in their pocket. At least that's true for me. My pocket seems to leak, whereas my IRA doesn't leak quite as much.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, you gave us a bit of a broad picture of escrow there, Rob. Is there anything from a mechanics point of view that people should understand?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me chat a little bit about how the escrow fits into the Reg A process. And as I mentioned, these are important pieces, whether it's a Reg B offering or a Reg A offering. Essentially, having an escrow not only provides what is often a regulatorily required solution. Private placements, it's almost always required, but it's something that provides tremendous comfort to investors. And in this space, that's a very important thing. We're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, some of whom might be tapping their IRA to invest in a new or emerging company. And so having a well-capitalized escrow agent that has experience, that has focus, that is a team that's committed to this and knows how to do it and how to stay through the process is really important. So you could think that the escrow has both a regulatory purpose and a marketing purpose because it gives individual investors a lot of comfort that the money is going somewhere safe before it goes to the entity raising the funds. We try to get involved as early as we can because that helps the issuing company structure the escrow and structure the transaction. Sometimes the investment bank or the placement entity is engaged, but usually the agreement is between us and the issuing entity, even if the banker brings us together. And we work with the issuer to go through the mechanics of the escrow. In some cases, there is a minimum capital threshold that's required to trigger a successful raise. And those pose unique issues and aspects with respect to the escrow, because if that threshold isn't hit, escrow agent also needs to have the capability to very quickly then return capital to the investors. But generally speaking, in a lot of Reg A, we don't see the min-max thresholds. And so really getting the escrow agent involved early on, structuring the deal so that we know where the sources of money is coming from, knowing that we have the capability to not only quickly disperse to the issuing entity, but again, if there was a minimum threshold that wasn't hit, that we can then also pay out to all the different. Those are all critical components of what we do.
Okay, Rob, just as a note, a couple people are having issue hearing you. So if you could speak up a little bit or turn up your mic, that might be helpful.
Sure.
Bill, just from an IRA perspective, are there, you know, how does investing through your IRA work? Are there different types of IRA that are you know, make Reg A plus investments more feasible?
Well, the big challenge, Jason, I think, is the idea that people don't know that they can do it. So they have to ask the question first. And the second thing is that when they have their IRA with one of the big brokerage companies, the brokerage companies don't necessarily want to deal with a small offering or deal with paperwork that isn't already automated and in the NYSE or wherever, because it makes it more complicated. And that's just not their business. So with an independent custodian like New Direction, you can tell us to invest in whatever it is that you decide. And usually there's paperwork involved, and that is often not automated yet, although we're all working on it to get it to be a one-stop shop to fly through with 3 clicks like it is to buy shares of IBM. But currently there's a little more effort involved in the investor side to make that transaction actually happen. And so what we do is we execute the transactions that are presented to us. We have the ability to execute pretty much any transaction that you find. We're just not going to give you a list to say, here, pick from this. We say, go out into the world, find all the Reg A offerings that you're interested in, and your IRA money can go and make an investment in that. The IRA owns it. The IRA gets the benefit. Hopefully lots and lots of appreciation, maybe even dividends and payouts along the way sometimes, but that all comes back to your IRA, just like it would if you were investing in shares of IBM.
Right. So would you say, I mean, you mentioned that, you know, people understanding they can do it seems to be the challenge. Is that what you would say is the biggest challenge in getting this adopted by the masses, or are there other components that are sort of holding you back?
I think that the knowledge that you can do it, and then the process of how you do it, because like I said, it's not 3 clicks. It's some extra clicks and some extra filling in of forms that maybe in the past your broker would have presented to you, just sign here on the bottom, and they're thinking about it. But in this world, people have to take charge of it, but it is their retirement money and they should take charge of it. So once they figure out that they can do it and what the limits that the IRS imposes, which are really hardly any, you can go and invest freely in whatever you choose. And hopefully you invest in something that you understand, and you're likely to do better when you invest in something that you can see issues with it and decide to invest or not.
Right, right. And that's been one of the great advantages of Reg A Plus is, you know, you've got a handful of investors that have sat on the sidelines for years, not being able to invest in private companies or effectively not invest, at least until they go public, but where they have great knowledge of the industry. So it gives them the opportunity to get involved in something they understand. So
our typical investor comes in, they've been doing something for 30 years. And like one of our main things is real estate. People invest in real estate. They've never even considered that they could do more of it. Or somebody has got a new invention and they've seen how it's going to affect the industry. They can invest in companies that are going to benefit from that. So it's really empowering to tell somebody that your brain can actually play a big part in the decision making for this world of investing.
For sure, and real estate's been one of those those industries that has taken off with crowdfunding in general since the start, because people have understood it. People that are in that sector get it, and having access to, large commercial real estate projects, for instance, is something they probably didn't have before. So,
Right.
it does simplify that process.
Yeah.
In terms of timing and requirements for escrow, Rob, I know you mentioned, it should be done early. What are the kind of tips for companies that need to get set up, need to have their escrow set up? Is it, one of the first things they should do? Obviously, talking to their lawyer is the first thing, but is it an early on in the process? Does it take a long time? What are the requirements there?
Sure, that's a great question. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's a very good question. And we're used to, in most of the capital markets transactions that we support, coming in late in the game, right? So ideally, we're able to come in a little bit earlier, help with questions, help to structure the transactions. But one of the keys to being a successful and effective escrow agent is to be able to turn quickly. So generally speaking, we might learn of a need days or the same week that someone wants to initiate its raise. And so the key to that is that we've got forms of agreements, template forms, that we're able to provide to issuers that pretty much lay out whatever is required. It just needs to capture the specifics of this particular, but it captures all that's generally required of the issuer. And the key is also, in addition to that template agreement, is that we need probably about 48 hours to do KYC, the know your customer requirements, on the issuer. We don't need to do that on the investors. We need to do that on the issuer. And so we can typically get those things done within a few days if need be. It's always ideal, again, to have more time. It's always ideal to be able to be involved earlier on to help the issuer with questions so they're not scrambling last minute. But we can generally get these things done quickly, same week, if need be. And that's where the experience, the templates, the focus comes into play.
So you raised a good point. KYC is obviously a huge component of compliance in general, whether it's the investor or the company. When you say KYC on the company, do you mean the officers, the directors, both? Does it make a difference if the broker dealer is involved and they're taking care of some of that KYC and ID and AML?
Sure, absolutely. No, it's a great question. And KYC is one of those gifts from our regulators that, we've worked hard to minimize the effect on our clients. And so we have a very streamlined process. Generally, the KYC that we're required to do is for the parties to the agreement. So essentially, if we're entering a two-party agreement with the issuer, the KYC is solely on the issuer, basic information, name of the entity, taxpayer ID, address. We require one or two documents that provide some kind of proof that the business exists and is real. There's a laundry list of 30 things that will satisfy, plus or minus 30 things that will satisfy that requirement. And then if there is a beneficial owner that has a stake of more than 25% in the company, there'll be some generic questions, again, name, address, social security number for those entities. And we also, lastly, ask for some information on what we call the controlling party. So we leave that to the issuer to determine, but if there's a key board member or the CFO or someone who will have very specific control of the escrow, we generally like to get some basic information on them. We lay all of this out up front, because the worst thing that can happen is you get to the closing table and you've got, a bank, an escrow agent that says, well, gee, we needed this. And so right up front, we'll list the requirements, we'll be very specific with what they are. We'll handhold if there are questions on it, and we'll make sure it's done cleanly. With respect to the investors, because this is important, generally speaking, the broker-dealer is doing KYC on the people who are engaging in the raise. It's very important for us as a bank to understand the source of funds. So as long as we've got the KYC that I just outlined on the issuer, and a very good understanding of where the money's coming from. And then in the worst case scenario, if for some reason down the road, we need from a compliance perspective to understand, Rob Weiss, who invested in this issue, we know that we can go to the broker dealer and they'll provide to us the KYC information that they gathered to approve that investor. So the key is to keep it streamlined, but to make sure that the required information is, we lay it out up front, we get it, and we have access to what we might need from an investor perspective later on during the term of the issue.
So working with a broker dealer seems to be quite important in the process.
It is, absolutely so. Because even if they are not a party to the escrow agreement and just the entity raising the capital is, working with a broker dealer who has engaged in this, who understands, who is doing the proper due diligence is critical to success.
Right. And Bill, does the broker dealer impact the IRA process at all?
Yes and no. I think the biggest feature we see in having broker dealers involved is just what Rob said. They've seen it, they understand it, they can communicate it to more customers. So the exposure of an investment will be a lot broader. And the broker dealer has already worked with that customer, so they probably can steer them into an investment that's more suitable to them. From the other side, when we're looking at KYC, we're mainly looking at our customer to make sure we know who they are, because we leave all the decision-making to them. So they can benefit from extra KYC done by their broker dealer that we're not going to require, but it's much to the benefit of the investor to have somebody else on their team that is looking out for that kind of stuff that the investor might not realize that they should be looking for on their own. And it opens the door to smaller dollar investment, particularly with RegA, because like you were saying, there are commercial investments that have lots and lots of money, and each slice is 100 or 200. But our typical client has 100 or 200 total, and they don't want to put all that into one. So now they can spread it with their broker dealer's help amongst a bunch of smaller investments and diversify in an appropriate way for them. And of course, we're not going to tell them to do it. It's all up to them, but this gives them opportunities that they honestly didn't have just a few years ago.
Right. And Rob, what if people were to try to take away something from the escrow, what is the risk that you're mitigating by providing the service?
Absolutely. It's a great question. The risk that we're mitigating is that, if you're a retail investor and you're investing through your IRA or through any other mechanism, this might be one of many opportunities that you're looking at. In a lot of cases, the companies that are engaged in the RegA process, they're not necessarily the companies who have long historic track records of performance. Doesn't mean they're not great entities, but having an escrow agent in the midst of the capital raise process, gives the investors comfort that, A, should there be, a fail for whatever reason, they'll be able to easily receive their funds back. And B, even if there's not a fail, it legitimizes the process, and that, they have comfort that the raise will be conducted efficiently and effectively and according to the requirements. And then and only then will the escrow agent release the funds to the issuing entity. So it's really a safety net for the investor, provides them with a comfort level. And as I said, in some private placements, it's absolutely required that there be an escrow agent. But if not, again, it's a security aspect, and it's good for for both the banker as well as the issuer, because a lot of times, we've seen situations where, and not necessarily in the RegA space, but in many commercial situations where escrows are required, in the past, you'd see bankers or you'd see attorneys say, hey, we'll just hold the funds and we'll stick them in a bank account. Or, the broker dealer might decide, hey, we'll hold the funds. Well, most of these entities aren't capitalized as well as we are. nor are they expert in, again, this very non-sexy yet very important control aspect of the transaction. And so it's an important function, and it should be played by an entity that has expertise in conducting it. The devil's in the details in these things. And so, we've done so many of these that it should lend comfort to investors and issuers to have someone this knowledgeable in the process engaged.
Right. So quick last question, I think, for Bill. Most people consider the process of investing through their IRA to be a bit of a root canal experience. How are you working to mitigate that and improve the process and sort of get through the KYC piece efficiently?
Well, I'm afraid it is true that that's where we come from, as Oscar continually reminds me. But we are crawling out of the swamp of everything being via fax, via paper. And one of the things with self-directed investing is they're all snowflakes. So we gather info from different places and move money from different places. But with KoreConX, they're trying to gather a lot of that in one place so that we have access to it all at once. So we gather all the info up front, we can execute the transaction in the back. It may still be work on our point or from our side, but we're not going to make it as hard for the investor because we're just going to get what we need. We know exactly what it is, put it in, fund the investment as soon as the money's over. So maybe just a quick trip to the dentist to pick up toothpaste rather than the root canal.
All right, great. I appreciate that. And thanks to you both for your genius insights into this. Compliance is something that generally scares a lot of people. So if they understand when to engage people and how to simplify the process, it certainly helps them sleep at night. I see Oscar in the next panel jumping on. Are there any questions, Oscar, that people had?
No. I mean, the only component of compliance, or to Robert Weiss and to Bill Humphrey, yes, that these are industries that have been there for many, many decades operationally, and this is a new entrance. And case in point, Bill Humphrey's firm has, I believe they're taking a strong leadership position to listen to the audience. And what are they listening to? It's not so much about what we want as KoreConX or anybody else. They're listening to the people who want to invest. And they're saying this, and you described it, it's like a root canal. Andrew Korn once told me that his experience doing an IRA would be one that he would never do again. How do we change that? And the good thing is that we have people like Bill and Robert that we're all listening to that, and we all want to be proactively wanting to do that. So a great panel, guys. Great bringing insight into it. Hopefully for everybody listening in, it's, even though to you may not see this is the stuff that they need to do to make sure that your offering is fully compliant. You now can appreciate why they ask so much information from you when they're getting set up, because there's a lot of risk factors. They have their own regulators that have nothing to do with you. None. I've learned that. I mean, I learned with the banks that SEC is one regulator. You guys got other regulators to deal with. And Bill, same. So this is about learning, understanding, bringing the pieces together. So thank you so much, guys. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar.